Hey guys, I'm Chelsea. I'm a growth consultant. Most of you know me. I love to put on these LinkedIn Lives with other people who could help you grow and scale your business. Today, I have Dan here from Sales Schema. He's going to introduce himself because he can do himself justice more than I can. Dan, want to take it away?
Yeah, Chelsea, thank you for having me on. Again, Dan Englander from Sales Schema. We basically help agencies and B2B service companies make sales a lot more repeatable and reliable by implementing outreach the right way. The way that we do that is by not going in cold, but by looking at areas where our clients already have trust with the people that they want to reach and basically picking the low hanging fruit over and over again. So we do that through some done for you work, although over the last year we've pivoted to becoming more of a training organization. So we train boutique agency teams how to build this in-house for the most part now.
Perfect. And just to sum it up for those that might not be in the lead generation or outbound world, mainly you do this with cold email.
We do, although like the definition of cold can be debatable, which is something I can get into.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's primarily through outreach, and I'm happy to get into why we like outreach, the pros and cons of it, and all that good stuff too.
So one of the reasons I really wanted you on a live with me is because we have such a strong belief about the importance of outbound.
Yeah.
And your entire company is about outbound, and you do that through email. And yes, I can't call it cold because you do find commonalities and make it warmer. But I get a lot of people that I'm talking to rebuke and rebuttal just email outreach in general these days. And I think we need to first start by clarifying the difference between a marketing newsletter and email outbound campaign for sales. So I've done it, but I'd love your take for my audience on how you explain the difference to your clients.
Yeah. So the main difference is you want outreach to feel like a one-to-one experience, like you wrote them an email that's just for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can achieve that effect at relative scale, although the numbers aren't as massive as the way that the people doing this wrong are usually doing it. But even if you don't achieve that, even if somebody's like, okay, you've sent this to other people as well, you still want it to be compelling and focused enough that it doesn't really matter at that point. Versus a newsletter is meant to create a one-to-many effect. And the fact is, like, everybody talks about personalization and how awesome personalization is, and it is, but there's pros and cons to both creating the one-to-many effect versus the one-to-one effect. There's the collective and the scarcity and the community and all those great things with the one-to-many, and then there's all the personalization and the focus and the persuasiveness of one-to-one. So it really just depends what you're going for. But I think where people get into trouble is they mix those things up, and they use the aesthetics of a newsletter to try to create a one-to-one effect with somebody or spoof a one-to-one effect, and that's where things fall apart.
That's an amazing way to explain it. So with the marketing newsletters that you send through Constant Contact, Emma, MailChimp, that's one to many, and people expect that. And I always say those types of newsletters are more promotional based, educational based, awareness based. And then what we're going to talk about today is that one-to-one email, whether it's hyper personalized or not. It's an email that's directed to one person, trying to get them to engage in a conversation with you via discovery call. Correct? That's how you would
Correct.
explain it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, after you.
No, I mean, I think for the people I speak to, they fall into two different camps. One camp is like, yeah, we've tried some outbound, it didn't work. Not really, it's not for us. Or some just haven't even tried it at all. And they're like, no, outbound's dead. We're not going to do it. What are your thoughts or how do you communicate what you do to those people?
Really good question. So first off, like to answer that in a roundabout way, we get into lots of conversations with agency owners, and they're like, I want to find these brands that are basically in market for agency services right now. So maybe they're thinking about intent data, or they're thinking about inbound marketing, which can be really powerful, and all these sorts of things. And my response is like, great, like you can go look for those brands. And if you want to find the ones that are looking for an agency right now, beyond referrals, beyond the stuff that you can't predict, then you're going to look for a pretty small pool of people. And then when you get on the phone with them, guess what they're going to say? They're going to say, thanks for reaching out to us. We'll put your hat into the ring or whatever. We'll throw you guys in there. But But 9 times out of 10, they're going to do business with the agency that's already built a relationship and trust with them, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you build more of those relationships and then start that cycle of building that trust more often and sooner? And outreach is a really great way to do that in a way that you control, in a way that doesn't make you have to go through a tech company and pay them lots of money and then have them change their policies and affect how you can interact with your audience, which is something nobody worries about until they have to worry about it, until something changes. And I can't tell you how many examples there are of that, with websites being blown up overnight because of Google's changes or whatever. So none of this is a screed against inbound. We do inbound. We're doing inbound now. It's great. But our belief is that outreach should be a major leg that holds at the table, especially email, because it's a channel that you actually control. So at the risk of maybe losing your question, I think the way to think about outreach is it's lumped in with lead gen. And yes, occasionally it can be lead gen. You might get lucky and you have the right person at the right time. But if we're talking about big ticket B2B sales, it's a relationship building channel. It's for opening doors. And when you reframe it that way, and you're like, the point of this is to build new relationships, you're going to have a lot more success. You're going to stick with it longer and you're going to understand it for what it is. So the downside with outbound is you're actually going to see your full sales cycle play out, right? From day 0 to day 1,000 or 300 or 75, right? But the upside of it is you get to control it, and it scales to the size of your market, and it still continues to work to this day very well. So that's kind of how we approach that argument, is just resetting expectations. And we have clients that are like, no, I need to hit this number in 3 months or else bad things are going to happen. Then it's like, well, probably don't do this now. Probably go talk to your clients and hit them up, ask for more business, hit up your network, and so on. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, I had recently had somebody tell me, because I don't know if everyone knows this, I'm a go-to-market strategist. So what I do is I go into companies, some of them are already established, some are not, and I help them scale and grow. And a lot of times what they're missing are these fundamental elements of outbound, including email, LinkedIn, cold calling, little things like that. And this woman was sitting there telling me that she needed 20 leads from outbound per month.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not the right person. You are not going to get 20 qualified leads. I mean, it was a smaller company too, right? It wasn't like we were doing outreach for Google. It was a small company. And the expectation was that she was going to run a cold email campaign that I was going to help her set up. And she thought, okay, well, then I'm going to generate 20 qualified leads. I'm going to get 20 discovery calls per month, and within a couple of months. And that's never how it goes. When you're doing any type of sales plan and an outbound strategy, it can take 6 to 12 months. And that's the number one expectation I try to put in their brains, that it's going to take time. Because like you're saying, it's building that relationship, putting feelers out, trying to hit the right person at the right time, and doing this over a long period of time. That's how you generate results.
Exactly. And I also think that outbound can be broad framed to serve other needs in the agency. So let me explain that a little bit. Every agency we've ever worked with has varying degrees of clarity. Some of them are very clear and they're like, we only work with this type of client. We've done it for years. We're not going to change, which is great. Then you can use outbound mostly to get, relationships that could result in business, as well as just learn about changes in the industry. But a lot of people in our programs, like we have an agency we're working with now, they do a lot of creative services work, and they also have a brewery, and they have a number of different verticals that they've worked with over the years. So they're, like a lot of people, they're in this process of figuring out, how do we specialize? What's the best way to specialize? Are we going to work with this vertical or that one? And what are the services that we're going to provide? So a lot of people approaching that, a lot of the times, like the advice is, talk to clients, which you should definitely do, do online research and that sort of thing. But there's nothing that can really beat having conversations with that market and trying to sell them stuff. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, like a concept we have in our program is the 70-30 rule, which is that outbound should be 70% revenue focused, 30% research and learning about your market. Even if you feel like you understand your market really well and you're like, hey, we've worked with fintech for 20 years or whatever, however long fintech's been around. things are dynamic. Things are always changing. You might have assumptions that are wrong. You might be like, why am I not keep breaking in with this type of company right now? And then it turns out that 80% of them have to go through an AOR for what you do, or there's this industry trend and people are not hiring, or there's an opportunity you didn't even know existed. So when you rethink outbound as a way to conduct really good research and stay active in your market, you're going to get results faster than if it's just, hey, let me sell you this discrete product right now, and if the timing's off, the conversation never even happens. That's not the way to do it in our experience.
So tell me more about that 30%. Are you sending surveys? Are you asking people just questions and asking them to respond?
Really good question. So we don't send surveys, nothing like that. The goal with pretty much all the outreach we do is making a one-to-one conversation happen, which is typically a getting to know you conversation. So the way this affects what we do is we want to give prospects a third path, right? Because with 99% of outreach, it's sort of like either it's implied or it's flat out sort of stated. Your options already either enter a sales process with me or ignore me / tell me to go away. So what we're trying to do with the copy is give people a third path, which is building a relationship. So it's sort of like, I mean, it's really like not, a massive difference than what most people are doing when they do their normal interactions with people on LinkedIn, or they follow up with somebody that they've met briefly at a networking event. We're just doing it at scale and in a more kind of systematized way, basically. So it's really just kind of a relationship building approach. Yeah.
So you ask them to get on the phone and have a conversation for research purposes, and do you incentivize them at all?
No, because usually the frame of it is I'm hoping to connect and be a resource to you. And the way that works is you're building on something that you already have, right? So a lot of our clients, they've worked with whatever, dozens of CPG brands, let's say. In our experience, that marketing decision maker does have something to learn and can benefit from that conversation. You just have to present it in a way that implies that that's the case, right? You have to be able to make that track record show through, and also be subtle enough with the copy that you can come across as somebody that's de-risking that conversation. And that's really another concept that we have, is like, you're really not trying to sell anything with outreach. You're just trying to de-risk a call. That's all you're looking to do. Yeah.
Love that. De-risk a call. And that's, yeah, I work with a lot of different types of companies. So I work in the agency space, tech and finance, because finance is my first background. And I can't even tell you how many times they're telling me that they just want to, like, I don't even know, write like a 4-page essay in an email form about how great they are or what they do, or, like, it's that copy is so important. And I have a messaging template. If you're watching this, I can send it to you. But you have to be really careful. You can't have a lot of pressure in that email. You can't talk about just yourself. You have to be very focused on the customer that you're reaching out to. Any other advice in copy? I mean, we say keep it short.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. This is kind of like a goofy sports metaphor, but if you had like a Tom Brady, right, and you had somebody that's amazing at football, and you put Tom Brady on a basketball court, it doesn't matter how amazing he is and how much cardio he has, he's still going to get wrecked because it's a different sport. And you can even look at sports that are very similar to each other, like, just slight changes, like in martial arts or whatever, can have a completely different effect. And I think we kind of have a similar issue with agencies that are very good marketers, they're good copywriters, but it's a context switch, and it's a different skill set that has to be learned, which is conducting one-to-one outreach. And it's like another mix up my metaphors. Sometimes it's a little reminds me of jazz. It's kind of like more subtle. It's, about the notes not played sometimes that makes that response happen. When we get responses from prospects, and a lot of the times these are people, VP, C-level, whatever, a very common response is a version of, I usually do not respond to unsolicited outreach, but there was something different about your approach. So the thing that's making it happen is not always intuitive. I think it's subconscious a lot of the time, but that's what people respond to. It's not usually like, oh, you talked about your amazing culture, or that you have this benefit or feature with your service. It's really something else going on. And I can get into more of what that is in a bit, but I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't give away all your IP.
Well, it's, there's some stuff, but no, but I mean, most of it I've written about in my book, Relationship Sales at Scale. Most of it's out there in terms of like the overarching methodology and everything. But again, kind of like back to de-risking calls. I think that we're in, and I'm not the only one to observe this, but I think we're in a trust recession now. And I think that it's especially true for businesses that sell things online, through that you could start with a laptop and an internet connection. Most people that are buying, whether it's an agency service or anything else, or even agencies that buy consulting services, like from people like us, have been burned, or they've been through a negative experience, or they're just overwhelmed with the amount of information. So I think the good news with that is that actually, like, getting on a call is not always that much less attractive than reading a bunch of articles, because it's overwhelming now.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that effect, but really, like, with that trust recession in mind, the sort of signals that need to be met are not the same as they used to be. It's not just about differentiation. It's really about trust, right? It's really about being able to communicate that I am in your world, so that if you've done work with CPG, you can talk the talk and walk the walk, and use the terms of art, and be able to not just say that you've done the work, but actually show them through tangible examples that you're in their world. And then there's lots of tactics for this, but commonalities help a lot. That happens to be what we do, is looking for, it doesn't have to be anything that fancy. We use, locations a lot. Like, people want to do these massive, complicated cold outreach campaigns right away, where it's like, who are the 50 CMOs that are in Omaha in your backyard right now for the companies that you want to reach? Why not start there, right?
Of course.
And so on. And I think that with this trust recession, like, a lot of people are thinking about outbound as just this massive cold thing, when really it's sort of interspersed with inbound, right? Like, you can do outbound to people that have converted on your list through ads, or through, trade shows or whatever. You can do these re-engagement campaigns. You can look at your network and look at friends of friends and contact them. So there's a lot of this stuff is kind of mixed together. And I think that the point of it is looking at areas where you already have that trust built. Yeah.
Great advice. Love the advice too, about how, because I've worked with a lot of agencies as well, marketing folks are great copywriters for marketing. It is a completely different skill set for sales, cold email, LinkedIn content, and LinkedIn DMs. Very different. And that's where you get into issues where an agency has tried outbound, so they call it, and they say it doesn't work. They say it's dead because they haven't necessarily done it the right way.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to jump into something a little bit different, the technicality of outbound. So you did touch a little bit on the volume side of things.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, this will segue, I think, into the second question. I hate it when people say XYZ is dead, just because it's like, it's usually said by somebody selling some other competing solution that's not that thing. And it's just never true. Like, it's like, maybe passenger pigeon is dead. I don't know that many people using passenger pigeons these days, but literally everything else, like, I can name like hundreds of companies that have made billions and continue to do so using that channel. And email is the only one that's like really anti-fragile, because it's only grown in terms of how ubiquitous it is. Now, people will look at trends like response rates going down, and then this and that thing. But the reality is, like, a lot of the times that's based on very anecdotal data. But even if the response rates are going down, it's like, that doesn't mean the channel's dead. Like, we still have to use email every day. It's still where we go to make plans and do business. And every social channel that is started requires you to put in an email address. So that doesn't mean never use any other channel, but it's still, works quite well. I can talk more about channels in a second, but But to get into the technical side of it, I think to back up a little bit before we get like into a a nerd rabbit hole on like deliverability and all these things,
Yeah.
Outbound has a technical component to it, just like SEO does, just like search engine marketing does, just like anything Facebook ads, just like everything else does. Um, I think the problem is there was a period of time when Outbound was sort of like easier to set up, and you could just like buy a domain and run a bunch of lists through it and then like have meetings come out the other side. It's now becoming a mature market like Facebook ads are and like search engine marketing is and all these other things. So there's a technical skill set that goes along with doing it the right way. So I think a lot of the times people are like, this is overwhelming, and it's really not any harder than any other skill set like a Facebook ad. So that's just something to keep in mind, and I think the rewards are actually can be potentially bigger. Let me pause there because I don't want to lose your question.
No, that's good. I will say in 2017, 2018, even 2019, I was hiring SDRs to do outbound lead generation, and they were prospecting by sending emails all day long. There wasn't an automated tool that we were using. I'm pretty tech savvy, I'd like to say, and I didn't have anything back then. So I had the SDRs just sitting there one by one, typing out the messages. Sometimes they were doing like a GMAS, but I already knew that that was not going to work. The deliverability on that was poor. Or a mass blast through Outlook. I knew the deliverability was an issue. So I would hire them to sit and just email one-to-one emails. And then I don't know exactly when it was, but it's probably around like 2020. I found tools. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, I don't need to just have someone sit there for 4 hours sending emails. Now a computer can do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I would say, get scared of that technology because they don't understand it. And there's also so much to learn with the speed of AI right now. There's always a new AI tool to learn. There's always a new automated software program to use, and it can be overwhelming. And that's why it's important to lean on consultants who have been doing this, because they can do it for you or teach you how to do it and get you launched much quicker. And then you're getting results. So we use different tools, and you don't have to share which tool you use, but pre-automation, what were you doing?
It's funny because like I guess I must have entered when those automated tools were still around, but I think they've changed a lot over the years, but also haven't changed that much. So I think the first one I used was probably QuickMail a long time ago.
Okay.
And then we've used Growbots. I think we used Woodpecker. We used Reply.io for a long time. Now we use Apollo, which in my experience opinion is best in class now for probably like 80-90% of use cases. Just because the data and the sending is in one place, the data is very robust and good for most purposes, and it's a very powerful platform. It's also a month-to-month sort of situation as opposed to like 12-month contract and that sort of thing. So within our programs, that's what we typically recommend to clients. I think that at this point also, like, it's important to know, I can't tell you how many times we talk to agencies that try to get off and running with Outbound on their own, and then they use their own domain. If you're acme.com, they're using acme.com to send emails, right? Which is a really big risk and a real issue, because if you get into a deliverability problem, then you can't conduct normal day-to-day email, which is a problem. So you always want to be setting up an extra domain. So I don't know if anybody needs to hear that, but if they do, there it is. So you would set up reachacmeagency.com or something and go from there. But yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a couple of things that I think are better starting places than the technical side, which is who's doing this. Because you mentioned you had SDRs doing the outreach for you back in the day. And I think that, I'm not going to say this or that's dead. There's people that really make the SDR model work. In my experience, they tend to be more transactional products where the product itself carries more of the heavy lifting, as opposed to the relationship and the learning that happens from that relationship. So in a consultative sale, I think the SDR model is really kind of failing, and it's really hard to make SDRs alone successful. The clients that we've seen, it doesn't mean that owners have to sell. You can have a salesperson do this, but there needs to be value that the recipient can gain from the call. It can't just be like, here's this thing, do you want it? Because if you think about just kind of the numbers game of that, if you're a properly specialized agency or B2B service company, you don't have infinite market. You probably have, several thousand companies you can reach out to. So if you're only banking on building relationships with the ones that are actively searching for what you do, then the BDR model doesn't really work. You need to be able to build that relationship and offer value on that call. So typically that's a higher level person. That's somebody that can talk about what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally that person is empowered with technology and a process and all that good stuff, which is something that we help people with. Yeah.
It's a great way to put it. And that's how it is for my SDR team now. And that's how it is when I'm pushing into a company and I come on and I help them. I teach them how to use these tools so the salesperson isn't sitting there sending those emails constantly. The tech is sending it for them. They're managing inboxes. They're managing inboxes for LinkedIn. They're doing other activities that I teach them. Also, it's important to say that a sales rep needs to have a personalized outreach plan for specific targeted accounts. So I'll take like 100 top accounts and say, this month in June, we're going to work these 100 accounts and you're going to personally email them from a different domain, but you're going to personally email them. You're going to track them down via pigeon if you have to. These are the ones you need to crack into while this runs in the background. The other thing is, because you shared your tech tools, I will share mine. So I first got started with Lemlist, Mailstand, and then I switched into Instantly. And I do like Apollo a little bit, but the reason why I like Instantly is because it offers a warm-up tool. So when you go and you have to set up a new domain to send emails from, you can't just set it up and start sending emails. You'll hurt the deliverability. Instantly offers a tool where it'll warm it up for you. Now there's warm up inbox and other websites you can use, but I like that it's all combined. Yeah. And then with Apollo, I like Apollo. I think it's fine. I have found for certain industries like finance where they're doing a lot of phone calls, Apollo is not doing a great job with phone numbers on the contact information. So we'll use like Seamless or Zoom Info.
Yeah, that's good to know. And there's definitely like pros and cons to different tools. I think that regardless of tech stack, like in our experience, like the first consideration is just like who's doing this, and what does the work look like, and that sort of thing. And then the tech sort of comes later. So like to talk about that a little bit, what we've sort of found to work in terms of outreach is thinking about it in terms of 3 different hats, which are like sets of responsibilities, not necessarily 3 different people, at least not right away. It might be 1 person or 2 people doing all those 3, but it's basically strategy, which is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but that's like, what sorts of companies are we contacting? What's in our strike zone? What are we saying to them? Higher level stuff, dealing with that on basically a weekly cadence. There's the salesperson who's actually going to be getting on that call. Typically at the beginning, it's the same as the strategist in a small agency, but that could change. And that's the face of the campaign. That's the person that should be motivated and have the time to do sales and to handle that whole process, all the follow-ups. And then there's research, which is the person kind of going through and building those lists. Now, when I say that, a lot of people are like, can't I just buy a list? Or can't I just go to the Philippines and get a VA to go build me a list? And what we're finding is that the AI may get there, and there may be a tool that I don't even know about that's gotten really good at this. But we've had our ear to the ground, and I think it will get there, but it's still not there. So for example, if you want to find fintech companies, you're going to plug in a bunch of filters like financial services and maybe some other stuff I can't think of now. And then you're going to get a whole lot of companies, and some of those are going to be fintech and a whole lot of them won't. So if you just pull them all in, you're going to have a campaign that does not work because you're going to get banks getting fintech focused emails. And if you don't specialize that much, it's just going to read like a bad cold email. So what does that mean? It means you have to have a person that understands markets enough and understands what you do and understands what a fintech company is to go in and look at that list and say, okay, this is a fintech company between X and Y. This is in our strike zone, and pull it in. So that doesn't have to be a full-time role. It could be outsourced. It can be a researcher. but it needs to be there at the beginning. It's usually a higher level person to learn the process, and then it can be delegated. So that's kind of how we think about running outbound the right way and running it effectively.
Scraping is everything. I owned a lead gen company before I do what I do now. And the biggest downfall was we would send them the lists because we were just helping. We weren't in their company. We'd send them the list and say, you have to scrape it, meaning you have to go through the list and delete folks off that are not a good fit. Yeah. Because even if we do the best job possible with our filters and LinkedIn and scraping and enriching on Seamless or Zoom, it's still going to be like 60% accurate. So you got 40% to 30% inaccuracy on every list, no matter what. And what we found was we would send the list and they wouldn't scrub them.
Well, I think that happens for a reason. And that's, part of the reason why we've developed the training program is because back to the 70-30 rule and clarity, a lot of agencies don't have a ton of clarity on what a really great company is for them. Mm-hmm. So we still have our done for you side where we're doing this for people, but for those people, we need a very high level of clarity. So if we were to send them that list, it would take them like 5 minutes, just be like, and also we're very good about getting the quality well and knowing what people want. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're listening to this and we were to give you a list of 1,000 people, 1,000 companies, and it would be hard for you to figure out which ones are right for what you do, it's probably a sign that you need to get clearer on things. And that's where doing this process itself can help you do that by actually seeing those companies and saying, is this similar to our best clients or not? Is this like them? And then working backwards from there. And everybody talks about building out the avatar, the ICP, and all this good stuff. I think for outbound, the way we like to think about it is looking at 3 at once. So 3 buckets of companies that you want to reach. The reason for that isn't that you necessarily have to rebrand your agency for 3 verticals or something like that. You could, but it's more about personalization. It's more about thinking about, okay, we're doing this ourselves right now, right? So we only work with, we say B2B services, but it's like 90% agencies. But even within that niche, which is pretty well defined, we've still got to break our outreach down into smaller buckets from there. So that, for example, design and creative services, PR, agnostic digital marketing, and then build the outreach around that so that when we get an email, it resonates, or when we send an email, it resonates much, much more strongly.
Yeah, I do the same exact thing. And to be honest, we were grouping by commonalities and we knew the ICP and we did that all with them. And it was just a matter of, a lot of the folks we were working with at that time, they didn't have necessarily a dedicated sales team, and they were so split on focus and they were leaning on this outside support. And they just wouldn't allocate the time to go through it. I would have to get them on a phone call, on Zoom, and have them sit there. And once I did that, they would do it, but it was more of just a time thing. And a lot of times, they'll look at the outbound, the cold email campaigns as I don't know, a solution almost to not having a sales team, not having a sales plan. And it's not. It's not a solution. It's part of the solution. So going to the results, I want to touch on that before we end. Someone launches a cold email campaign, the ICP, so the ideal customer profile is good. We're targeting by commonality. We have a good copy going out, so the messaging's great. What do you see for results? How many discovery calls booked on average per month?
Yeah, we're probably seeing about 8 to 20 per month. 20 would be the very high end, I would say.
Very high. Yeah.
But somewhere around that, it's usually not a ton. In our own efforts, we're our best client. So when this thing was when we've had it rocking and rolling, we're probably getting about a meeting a day from it. But that's, the emails are coming from me, and CEOs are going to get more responses than others on the team and that sort of thing. And we've also been doing this for a long time. So that's kind of a rough range. And again, what we're tending to see with outbound, and these are not just our numbers, is that the close rate on meetings is going to be about 10% on average. You can probably get it up to 20. And for most people starting this, it's probably going to be below 10. But the power of it is that you get to engage your whole market and you get to control exactly how you do it. And you really can do this tastefully if you do it the right way. Where even when we get, responses for people that aren't ready to talk, it's very rare for us to get like take me off your list sorts of emails.
Yes.
This past week, we have a client in the PR space. We got meetings with major sports leagues, with Fortune 100 restaurant groups, C-level people within the last 2 weeks, through email. They're sending an email that's like, I'm in your world and we should talk, right? The right words, the right people. So it's another thing I love about this is the simplicity of it. And I think that like a lot of the times when people get off and running with Outbound, they overcomplicate it. They read about something online and they want to add multiple channels at once, which can increase results. There's a time and a place. Like if you're going from one to the other, it can get you more meetings. But the amount of time and complexity of adding another channel like phone or LinkedIn skyrockets, right? Because you've now got to sync all that data so that if somebody gets back to you on LinkedIn, they're not getting another email or whatever. And when we're talking about an agency team where it's like one person split between a whole bunch of other things, that doesn't usually make sense right away, right? So we usually like to start with the email for that reason. Yeah.
That's great advice. Yeah, I do. I mean, I push in and I establish something with all channels because usually they need them, but I have a way to navigate that.
Yeah.
For me, in doing this for years and years and years, I would say if people are getting on their cold email campaigns 6 to 8 qualified meetings per month, they're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Qualified. And that's the terminology because you're going to get calls that aren't qualified in that mix.
Right.
And yes, 10%. So let's say you get 10, you do really well and you get 10 qualified meetings, you close one, that's one deal per month. It more than pays for the tech, the time, the energy, the money for a consultant or an agency to help set it up. It really is something that companies need to be doing just in their background. I mean, it basically is the new marketing newsletter. So 10 years ago, everyone needed a marketing newsletter. Well, today, everybody needs this one-on-one email that actually gets delivered into the inbox of their prospects to start those conversations and keep leads coming in. Dan, I also want you to share with the audience a little bit about your program because you have a really cool program for people who want to learn how to do this themselves.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. Really appreciate that opportunity. It's basically called the Targeted Outreach System. And the goal with it is by the end of 90 days, we want to show people how we're able to get those numbers, how we're able to get, 8 to 10 or so appointments per month by using tasteful targeted outreach. So it's basically all of our IP. We're basically doing weekly calls with agencies. We have an online curriculum that has a bunch of copy examples and case studies and goes step by step through this. It's a series of 3 courses. We have one-to-one checkpoints with people. We're doing asynchronous feedback with the goal of basically like building the system and then getting it humming within the 90 days. So right now, it's basically something we're looking to just keep at a relative capacity so that we don't stretch ourselves too thin. I think right now we have like 5 openings at the time of this recording to get that going.
Great. So if they're interested, they can contact you on that. And then for your book, Relationships at Scale, where can people find that?
Yeah, Relationship Sales at Scale is on Amazon. It's probably the best place.
Perfect. Easiest.